Hey, what's up, s'mores? I'm Shannon Morse. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we are diving into the brand new Google Pixel 8a. Now, I had purchased one for myself with expedited shipping so that I would receive it as early as possible. But I also received a Team Pixel 8a a little bit after my purchased one was delivered, so a huge thank you to Team Pixel for the gift from Google. So a lot of people are wondering, is this thing worth $500? Well, I did buy one, but of course, that does not mean necessarily that it's going to be a perfect phone. That just means that I wanted to get this thing in as early as possible because I had a little flight out to Cabo last week to catch, so I took it with me. So first things first, let's talk about the price and the color options. The Pixel 8a comes in at a pretty good price point at $499 for 128 gigs or $559 for 256 gigs MSRP here in the United States. Now you can snag it in 4 different colors. Those are Aloe, which is this one, Bay, Porcelain, and Obsidian. I have the Aloe color, which is very eye-catching. It's really pretty. I very much like it. Obsidian is the only one available at 256 gigs. I dislike when the pretty colors are not available at the higher spec. I would love to have this one at 256 gigs. Now, Google kept the box pretty standard. You get the usual phone, the Pixel 8a, a 1-meter USB-C to C cable. You get your quick switch adapter, a SIM tool, and a little bit of documentation. That's it. The release date was just last week. I got it on May 13th, so it's fresh off that UPS truck at time of recording. I've had it for about a week and a half as of today, so I think that's plenty of time to give you a solid review. The Pixel 8a feels very nice in hand. It's not as premium as the 8 or the 8 Pro, obviously, but it is very well made. It has a very sleek matte composite back with a matte aluminum frame. The dimensions are 6 inches in height, 2.9 inches in width, and then 0.4 inches in depth, and it weighs at just 6.6 ounces, which I gotta say is very lightweight, and this is a small boy. So if you like small smartphones and you want a small, comfortable one to hold in your hand, this one's a small one, so I think you would like it. You will find your usual array of ports and buttons. There's a USB Type-C 3.2 port at the bottom, there's a power button and a volume rocker on the right side, and the SIM card slot is over on the left. The speakers are dual stereo, offering a very decent audio experience, which is very much on par with other phones that I have tested at this price point. It's also IP67 waterproof as well. Now that is great. I'm super happy to see that. I was able to take this thing in a pool. I dunked it underwater, had no issues there. It did fine whenever I was getting it splashed at the pool as well, though the screen will be a little bit glitchy while it is wet. That's pretty normal with most phones whenever they are hit with some water. And the charging port will warn you of exposure to moisture, so you can't charge this thing immediately after it's dunked in some water. Now, compare that to the OnePlus 12R, which is around a similar price point. That phone cannot be submerged, so keep that in mind. Now, if you are finding this video helpful, a subscribe would mean so much to me. Subscribing is the simplest way of showing me which videos you find helpful and valuable, and it tells me which direction I should take my channel in. My channel was actually recently hit with this very annoying YouTube glitch where they say that audience views are invalid. They call it invalid traffic, and they don't pay me for the ads that they show on my videos. I know, that's super unfair, and I don't have a way to fight it because YouTube's explanation is extremely vague. So luckily I do have the support of y'all via Patreon and YouTube memberships to offset those kind of problems. I did share some more details about that problem on my community tab. So I did want to say a big YouTube member shout out to Daytripper and Stephen R, who recently joined, and shout out to my newest Patreon Golden through Ultimate S'mores, Charles S and Chad. You can join them and support my channel by going over to patreon.com/Shannon Morse, or just by hitting the subscribe and join button down below for perks like early video access and my private Discord. And a huge shout out to Alan as well for buying me some coffees. Now, as usual, all the videos on my channel are free to watch, and I thank you all for making that possible, even when YouTube thinks that my views are fake. So let's continue on with that review. Now, speaking of the screen, the Pixel 8a sports a 6.1-inch Actua display, which is vibrant, it's very sharp. It's got a resolution of 2400 by 1080. The pixels per inch are 430. The brightness peaks up at about 1400 nits HDR and up to 2000 nits peak brightness, so visibility in bright sunlight should not be an issue. I did take this out in sunlight, obviously. It's very hard to capture that on camera because of exposure settings with my other phone, but I was able to use this clearly in daylight. I didn't have any issues seeing anything on the screen. The more that I use it, the less that I'm bothered by those huge bezels that I had mentioned in my first impressions video. Yes, the screen is smaller compared to my bigger $1,000 phones, but it is comfortable to hold. The bezels do have the benefit of making it easier to use like swipe gestures while having a case on the phone. It's also got an always-on display. It runs at a very smooth 120 Hz, but you do need to go into your settings and enable that smooth display setting to take advantage of that. Also, it is protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 3, so if you accidentally drop this thing on the floor next to a pool, it'll be just fine. Ask me how I know. All right, let's move on to the cameras. So the Pixel 8a packs in a dual rear camera setup. There's a couple of them. I'll put the specs on the screen, but basically it's a 64 megapixel quad PD wide camera along with a 13 megapixel ultra wide lens. Now for video, you can record in 4K at 30 or 60 FPS with slow-mo support up to 240, and there's also time-lapse options. The front camera is a 13 megapixel shooter. That's a slight upgrade from the previous A series, making it really great for group selfies. Similar to the rear camera, it's packed with features, and you can also record at 4K at 30 but not 60 on that front camera. Now let's take a look at some of my photography and videography examples. The main 64 megapixel camera will give you some really color-rich tones, great clear photos, crisp details, which I was expecting out of a Pixel phone, to be honest. I was taking photos in shadows with bright backgrounds. It did a great job of leveling out the exposure, so nothing looked dark or overexposed. I also really love the natural bokeh blur that you get with this main lens. Those photos were not taken in portrait mode, even though they look like they were. They look very good. Food photography and photos of landscapes all look very, very nice, especially in the daylight. Now you do get some noise introduced whenever you take those photos in the evening or at night, but overall, I would say the photos look really great. Taking photos of moving targets. I found kittens. I was obsessed. That's all I wanted to do on my vacation is play with the kittens and have them join me in my vacationing room and then take them home. But I feel like customs would have a problem with me bringing home kittens, so that didn't happen. I would suggest using Top Shot in the Google Camera app for these and taking multiple photos because yes, some of them were blurry. It was not fast enough to capture every single photos of those adorable fur babies, but when it did get a clear photo, it looked really great. Wide angle at dusk, it does need some lens correction at the edges, but it was color accurate, though the details in the palm trees were completely lost. They were pretty muddy. There is some noise. Using the main lens at dusk brought out a lot more detail. And then we have the zoom. Now I've gotten very used to really good zoom quality from my Pixel 8 Pro and my S24 Ultra. So the zoom on this will get you 5 times zoom recording and 8 times zoom for photography. You would not believe me if I told you this, but there is actually a little iguana on that rock fence line, that rock barrier right there. But the zoom quality is so muddy that you can't even tell. It could not really distinguish the iguana from the rest of the image. It kind of blended everything together and it really did not look good. The nighttime photography and night sight did well enough for social media, though if I really wanted to take pictures of stars at night, I'd probably choose astrophotography instead, which is included in here. Photos did have some noise, but the colors are warm. It's still packed in a lot of little details, and that goes for both front and rear facing lenses. Now, the front facing camera on here is also really clear. Everybody that I took pictures of was in focus, even if our distance was not equal, like my husband was a bit farther away in one of these pictures, but it still kept both of us in focus, so it did a really good job with that, like that aperture setting. Photos were also very clear and very sharp. Now, the video recording stabilization left a bit to be desired. Like, for some reason, it auto-corrected my angle at the beginning of this shot, so the horizon that I was taking an image of was slanted. That was a little weird, and I know I didn't like like slant my phone when I started recording, that would have been something that I would have clearly noticed in the lens when I was taking that video. So it was very strange that it auto-corrected my angle like that. I don't know what happened there. Now, when I was walking, I was definitely on an uneven surface out there in the sand, but the image was a little bit disjointed. It had sudden movements which did not align with my actual movements. It seemed kind of bouncy and all over the place, so I would say that the stabilization is not great, but the audio was pretty exceptional, and you can make that even better with Google's audio eraser tool, which is an AI tool that they introduced, I think that was back in October. It's an awesome tool. Highly recommend if you're in a noisy environment.
Hello.
Hello.
This is the Pixel 8a, and I'm recording in 4K and testing how well it does stabilization in audio since there's a bunch of waves in the background. How's it sound?
So based on my use of the cameras, it's definitely not perfect. Zoom and low light captures could be better. Daylight usage was lovely overall. Okay, let's take a look under the hood. Now the Pixel 8a is powered by the Google Tensor G3 chipset. It's paired with 8 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM and options for 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage. There is no SD card support, of course, but I would have preferred to have some more storage options, like have all the colors available at 256 or have a 512 gig model. That would have been nice. I do have some test scores from 3D Mark showing that this would be considered mid-grade in terms of power. I also played a few video games on it as well. Google's UI is clean, it's intuitive. The Pixel 8a runs on Android 14. Mine did have some updates available right out of the box. There's minimal bloatware, which I always appreciate. Plus, there are some fun features integrated into this phone using AI, such as the videography and the photography tools, circle to search, which I've actually used a lot to find different merchandise items, like in my anime community, so that's super easy and useful. In messages, there's this AI assistant called Gemini, instant translations, which I don't know a lick of Spanish, so that was 100% useful in Cabo, especially when I was like translating menus and stuff like that. Call screening, hold for me for phone calls, lots more. It's kind of amazing that you get all of these new features in a $500 phone now, so you don't necessarily need to get the more expensive 8 or 8 Pro if you were really gunning for one of those AI tools specifically for your own purchases. Now, of course, if you don't want to use any of those, you definitely don't have to. Now, speaking of concerns with AI, let's talk about security. Now, for security, you've got face unlock, you've got the under display fingerprint sensor. I found both of those work really well. They are both very quick and responsive. You also get 7 years of updates, which is also included, and it's using the Titan M2 security chip. Connectivity options are robust. There's Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3. I connected these to my Pixel Buds and my Samsung Galaxy Buds, both of which had excellent connections to this phone. Now, in terms of audio, I would say it's pretty solid with stereo speakers and support for high quality Bluetooth codecs. There are also 2 microphones with noise suppression, and you can definitely tell how well it suppresses noise whenever you record videos or you're talking on the phone with somebody and they can clearly hear you. Now, on the opposite side of that, I had a hard time hearing my mom out of the speaker when I called her, so it would have been nice if I could boost the audio a little bit more whenever I'm in a noisy environment. She could hear me fine because of that noise suppression, but I couldn't hear her very well over all the noises around me when I was hanging out at this resort. Battery life is another strong point. The Pixel 8a supports 24 plus hours of battery life, up to 72 hours with extreme battery saver. Now, in a real world scenario, because I know those are just spec numbers online, I had 100% battery at 10 a.m. I finally got it down to 30% at 11 p.m. So that's about 13 hours in, and 7 hours of that was screen on time. It has a typical battery capacity of 4492 milliampere hour. It supports fast charging, and it is also Qi certified for wireless charging. Now, somehow that part totally slipped my mind, and I was pretty happy to see that I can wirelessly charge this phone. Oftentimes, that is one of those features that is removed from cheaper phones. So having that in a $500 phone is pretty impressive. Okay, so what is the verdict? Well, the Google Pixel 8a offers a lot of bang for your buck. It's got a small, compact design. It's got that great display if you can get over those bezels. It's got good camera capabilities, could be better, solid performance. I don't really consider any of those to be deal breakers. And it's also $200 cheaper than a Pixel 8, but it still packs in all of those cool new AI capabilities. So overall, I would say that it is a fantastic option for the price range. So should you buy it? Well, if you are looking for a reliable mid-range phone with a clean Android experience, great AI features, then I would say the Pixel 8a is definitely worth considering. I have a question. What are your analog hobbies? My Patreon Golden S'mores and Up have the opportunity to share what they are up to outside of the world of tech. And Joel responded saying that he is going to a gaming expo, and he also got to meet the 13th Doctor from Doctor Who, which I think is so cool. I love Jodie Whittaker, she's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your analog hobby, Joel, and I wanted to share my own analog hobby from this weekend. I started reading Three Body Problem. The new show on Netflix inspired me to actually read the book because everybody said the book is good. Now, if you haven't read it yet, this book is really so good. I have seen the show too, so no spoilers about the book, please, but I'm about 100 pages in. I have tons to go. I heard the second book is also really good, so if you're a sci-fi nerd, if you're really into reading really good sci-fi books, this one is like philosophical, it's scientific, but it also like delves really deep into futuristic technology. It's so interesting. I highly recommend this. So that's my analog pick for this week, and if you are a Patreon supporter, make sure to send in your own analog picks as well. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, y'all.